Chinese mainland released 31 new measures covering exchanges and cooperation to enhance cross-strait ties. How will these measures help to deepen cross-straits integration? The U.S. Senate Committee on Foreign Relations advanced the Taiwan Travel Act after the House of Representatives passed the bill in January. What will be the impacts of this act on China-U.S. bilateral relations? Tsai Ing-wen has endured a low poll rating since taking office, and with a local election coming this year, how will Taiwanese politics be affected 2 years ahead of the next general election? And what are the most certain and uncertain issues across the straits in 2018? As officials from both sides continue to expand cross-straits economic and social cooperation, more and more Taiwanese youth live and work on the mainland. How do we evaluate the younger generation's role in this regard?
The Chinese mainland just announced new policies on Taiwan. This time, they talk to Taiwan people directly. These highly preferential measures will treat people from the island as locals for studying business, and working and living here on the mainland. Will the move change cross-straits economic momentum and affect social and cultural integration? However, stumbling blocks remain, such as Tsai Ing-wen's refusal to the One China principle and the U.S. Congress' recent passing of the Taiwan Travel Act. How do we look at the new policies released by Beijing? And how will the U.S. challenges on the One China principle affect China-U.S. relations? And what are the most certain and uncertain issues across the straits in 2018? To talk about these and much more on the integration policies across the strait, I'm pleased to have with me Mr. Zhong Hotao, a research fellow from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and Gregory Yin Tang, a current affairs commentator in our studio and Taiwan affairs commentator. We'll also talk to Professor Liu Foucault from the Institute of International Relations at Chengchi University in Taiwan. And that's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Zhou Yue. Let's talk about the recent policies just unleashed by the mainland authorities. It is a comprehensive set of policies, 31 in total, but it is basically about reaching out to the Taiwan compatriots. They will treat it as equals as people here on the mainland to study, to work on the mainland. What kind of effect do you think this will have on cross-straits relations?
I think this particular arrangement is a very important step to take, and also very timely, because Tsai Ing-wen is now in charge in Taiwan. She had made many moves up and down, inside out, to resist the acceptation of the One China policy and so on. Therefore, having these concrete proposals made, black and white, on the table to facilitate exchanges, to make the businessmen on the other side of the Taiwan Strait and the students in China be able to do their job, to do investment, do their traveling, whatever that is, more comfortable. So this is a very strong, positive message to tell where Chinese government is standing at this point.
But this happens in the context that the official dialogue between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait has been suspended because of Tsai Ing-wen's refusal to One China policy. Why the mainland put forward such kind of policy, which are targeted especially at the grassroots?
Just because in Chinese mainland's mind that the two sides belong to one family, so we are one family, and we should take more preferential policies towards those people, especially those grassroots in Taiwanese people, because we are one family. And another reason, just as you said, the official dialogue has been suspended. So for the Chinese mainland, we have to lower our communication with those people in Taiwan. That's the reason we have to become much more open on Taiwan issue, become more attractive for those Taiwan people.
Obviously, before this policy, the Taiwan businessmen have been investment in the mainland for decades.
Yes.
And it is growing fast.
Mm-hmm.
Where is the necessity of providing more preferential policies for either investors and workers from Taiwan?
Actually, in the past almost 3 decades, those Taiwan businessmen have made great contribution for the Chinese mainland economic and social development. Still, they are facing lots of difficulties and even some dilemmas. For example, some of them are considering transfer to some Asia and South countries to invest in those areas. For this reason, the Chinese mainland has to change its policy, for example, to provide more preferential policies for those entrepreneurs. For example, to invite them to join in our China 2025 manufacture project and some other great national project. And I think for this reason, more and more Taiwan businessmen would like to invest to work in Chinese mainland, especially in the some central and west part of China.
And which sectors do you think, Greg, will benefit the most from Taiwan?
I mean,
because Taiwan has been strong in semiconductor and services, and those areas will be the most beneficiary of this?
These are all obvious areas that they can make sizable contributions in China. Yesterday, for example, I met a group of innovative young men from Taiwan now doing business in China. They started a new startup company, and they are very, very optimistic for several reasons. For example, one is the Taiwan employment chances are limited. And the salary relatively low. And second, they have a city. They don't have a large population to develop their business. But in China, the potential is infinite. So they feel very much encouraged with these policies on the table. They are in a much better position to develop their career. So I think the trend cannot be stopped. Taiwan tried, for example, Tsai Ing-wen going south. That's not going anywhere, right? And also the visitors from China are decreasing. So having this proposal on the table obviously would help Taiwan a lot, to build up the economic strength, economic financial status. By doing that, of course, this benefit people on both sides of Heaven Street. It's not just one-sided, but covers both territories.
Do they have a reason to doubt whether this is mainland's aim to siphon off talents off from Taiwan and create a certain kind of a vacuum for the local economy?
You're absolutely right. I think Tsai Ing-wen is a very shrewd politician. Her aim at this point is to win the election in November for the mayor's election first, and set the stage for 2 years from now, the general election. So everything that mainland China has done positively with good intentions, she will interpret in a different fashion. This is sort of to try Taiwanese to go to China has no return. So eventually the political pressure will be placed on us. So we have no other alternative but unite China under the Chinese government's terms. So these explanations, I think, would not be able to stay for long because people have common sense and with good reasoning can tell the intentions, good intentions from China does not have the string attached. It's purely an approach essential to help people in Taiwan to get better settlement, better development in China, and benefit people all over the place.
And what kind of political blowbacks can we expect from the current Taiwan local authorities if this policy really worked, in the sense that it will attract both investment and personnel away from Taiwan?
I think in future maybe Tsai Ing-wen authority will set some barriers for the people-to-people exchanges and economic cooperation between the two sides. For example, the Tsai Ing-wen authority may be to release some new regulations to control the two sides cooperation. And I think
like what?
Like for example, in the past year, the Tsai Ing-wen authority not allowed the retired generals to visit Chinese mainland. Maybe in future it will
restrict travels of Taiwan
Yes,
people.
exactly. Restrict.
Which will be very unpopular because the Taiwan economy is already declining, as it hasn't been enjoying very popular support on the island.
But
does she have political capital to spend to further restrict the movement of Taiwan people?
Although she does not have enough political capital, but she still try her best to restrict the cross-strait exchange. In her mind, the Chinese mainland is hiding some political intention, but actually that is just her own imagination. And so Chinese mainland, we are just helping those people in Taiwan. We are just helping the compatriots from Taiwanese. We have no political intention. That is just her personal or just its own imagination, I think.
And another way to look at this is that this is a serious measure that will win the hearts and minds of the Taiwan people.
Yes.
In the past, maybe many Taiwan capitalists and investors benefit from the cross-strait relations, but the common Taiwan people haven't enjoyed the ripple-down benefits as many expected. And this will change the picture.
You're absolutely right. For example, during the Ma Ying-jeou administration for 80 years, things changed drastically across Taiwan Strait to benefit business development. However, many of these advantages are not enjoyed by the people on the streets. The big shots, the business tycoons enjoy much more. So this particular arrangement announced last month would change the picture drastically to give everyone, people on the streets, common citizen, a chance to have a piece of the pie. So in the long run, I do believe this good intentions will prove to be true.
But will it help improve the social, cultural, and national integration between especially the young people on both sides of the Taiwan Strait?
Of course. In the past year, the cross-strait trade volume increased by about 13%. And I'm sure in this year, in 2018, the number of the growth would become much higher. As for the people-to-people exchange in the past year, about 6 million Taiwan people come to Chinese mainland to visit, to study, or starting business, and I think the number will also increase. As for this, I think the two sides will shape or to make a sense of the community of a common future, and I think this will help or at least pave the way for the peaceful development across Taiwan Strait, and especially for the long term of reunification.
That will have long-term effects. Well, thank you very much. We're talking about the cross-strait relations in 2018. And I'm watching Dialogue. Don't go away. We'll be back in a while. So cross-strait relations is important, but there are many players. Here it is, especially the U.S. China has just lodged complaints to the U.S. over the recently passed Taiwan Travel Act. It passed by the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations recently and passed by the House. This basically allowed Taiwan to have personnel exchanges, high-level personnel exchanges with the U.S. Why the U.S. Congress passed this kind of a legislation at this time, and will the U.S. administrative branch really follow through?
Well, as you know, the United government is a system of check and balances. The congressmen or the senators have their own ideas to promote certain acts. By even the White House approved that, that doesn't mean it will be implemented faithfully, because that gesture in most cases is sort of support. Taiwan gave them a pat on the back, say, we're behind you. So I do not believe the higher administration.
So it's just a show of political support, but it's not substantial.
Yeah, no, not at all. Because by doing that, for example, if they do have an official visit across the Pacific Ocean, from Washington D.C. to the Taipei, and the ministers and also
cabinet level
cabinet
officials
levels, that would affect the interests between mainland China and the United States. So I don't think the U.S. government will take the risk to do that. So everything considered, this is just a gesture, but it would not be implemented substantially.
And Mr. Zhong, do you think this will be a red line for mainland, that U.S. and Taiwan have high-level official visits?
Yes, of course, it would be a red line, since according to the Taiwan Travel Act, the United States would allow all levels of high-level officials from Taiwan to visit United States. And that means even Tsai Ing-wen and her partner would visit United States. I think this would seriously violate the United States One China policy and the 3 Sino and U.S. joint communiques. So that would be our red line. If the United States finally really take it as a law, then the Chinese mainland would take some countermeasures.
Let's get some perspective from Professor Liu Foucault from Tsinghua University. Professor Liu, so if the U.S. passed the legislation of Taiwan Travel Act and President Trump signed on that bill, what will Taiwan do? Will Taiwan send high-level officials to the U.S. and will it receive high-level officials from Washington?
I think the reality is even after President Donald Trump signed up this Taiwan Travel Act, and it all depends on the political situation between the United States and China, and whether President Donald Trump will send somebody or even our senior official from the government contacting the United States or send them to the United States. But in the short term, personally, I do not believe anything is going to happen because as you just mentioned, this is a quite serious feeling in Beijing. If something really touching on this political front, Beijing's response would be very different. So I believe for the time being, but looking from reality, the United States, even if they are pushing along this Taiwan Travel Act to become a formal legal document, but I think China cannot stop them from doing anything.
So, Professor Zhong, it seems the U.S. is using this as a leverage in its relations with China.
Yes.
How do you look at this? Because on one hand, it seems that Taiwan has been used as a leverage for a long time, but on the other hand, it has been silent on the radar for quite some time. What do you make of the U.S. recent move in relations to Taiwan?
Just as you said, United States just Taiwan as a leverage against Chinese mainland. It just want China to make more compromise on some specific issue, for example, trade or even North Korea issue and some other related issue. And so from this, you could find that United States, it is not helping Taiwan, it is just hurting Taiwan because United States just taking Taiwan as a bargaining chip. And in future, if the China and the United States playing together or even there are some conflict between the two countries, I'm sure Taiwan will become the ant and it become the victim for this kind of conflict between China and the United States.
And Professor Liu, is this the agreement in the Taiwan Authority that Taiwan has been used in the relations between China and the United States? It's not easy to make a choice anytime soon.
Yes, it would be very difficult for our government now to make any decision to go through such a stream of opportunity in between China and the United States. So since we discover Senate already passed this law, and there are a lot of experts warning our government, everything would have to be very cautious. Otherwise, something will go really beyond controllable.
But Tsai Ing-wen has been under a huge amount of pressure because of a refusal to subscribe to the One China policy. And recently, the pro-independence camp have been advocating even changing the constitutional status of Taiwan. Former Taiwan leader Li Denghui and Chen Shui-bian both spoke on that matter. It seems Tsai Ing-wen is under a lot of pressure.
Yes, yes. Of course, within the DPP party itself, a lot of active, strong Taiwan independent factions are pushing Tsai Ing-wen so seriously. And when Tsai Ing-wen is not so popular at this moment, she will fear so carefully and listen more from those independent factions' pressures.
But
so this is Taiwan's domestic politics at this moment.
But do you think she will remain basically inactive, doing nothing, or she will choose to be more proactive and even choose a dangerous path ahead?
I think if there is an opportunity comes up, she would not hesitate to just push along. But this is not just a unilateral action. It has to go between Taipei and Washington. If both sides would agree upon, and I believe until then, Washington may have some message to Beijing to consult. And I think something would have to be more rational. It should not come as something unexpected.
And I think she also has some other things to consider. That's the political landscape in Taiwan. In 2018, there will be provincial elections in Taiwan. What do you see the results of such an election, and will it change the political landscape in Taiwan?
So far, it's still too early to predict something comes out of the election. But what I can tell is, judging from political atmosphere now in Taiwan, currently our policy agenda from Tsai Ing-wen's administration is very confused. So we should not see any clear policy agenda coming before the election. So you cannot expect many things to come out. Many of senior officials in the government are involved in election process. So once involved in the process, nothing we can really expect coming out of these important policies.
So
financial.
So it will probably be a quiet period before the local elections wrap up this year in 2018. But Gregory, what is your projection of the local elections in Taiwan? Will the KMT come back with power, or
chances are there?
Will remain
there are three different factors would be applied to affect the outcome of the forthcoming mayor's election. Number one, Tsai Ing-wen's performance herself. If her approval rate going further down, that will trigger down to the local level to affect the local election. Second, it depends on the KMT, how well they can consolidate their strength, be able to recommend credible candidates, attract the votes, and also be able to mobilize young people in Taiwan to join the force, to support the KMT.
Will she be able to do that?
It's up in the air. You cannot tell for sure. But I think Tsai Ing-wen herself should do three things. Number one, to make the two-party system in Taiwan going strong, not thinking of crushing KMT altogether to become one-party rule. Second is to have good relations with mainland China, to have Taiwan's economy, social development in the long run, and also do not depend on Japan and the United States as a backup.
And also about international relations. Taiwan has been squeezed some way, its diplomatic maneuvering room. There are recent reports that China is seriously considering establishing diplomatic relations with the Vatican. Taiwan has only 20 very small, insignificant countries recognizing it as a sovereign state. How much of diplomatic pressure will this have on Taiwan and change its trajectory?
If the Vatican abandoned Taiwan authority, I think Tsai Ing-wen's public opinion poll or public speaking support will decrease dramatically, and I think that would be a great shock for Tsai Ing-wen, especially just as you said, the 2018 election is coming. So in future, this will become a great uncertainty for Tsai Ing-wen authority. As for Vatican, I just want to emphasize several points. The first, Vatican has been abiding one China principle. Although now it holds the so-called diplomatic relation with Taiwan, but it holds one China principle. The second is actually the Vatican has been preparing its diplomatic relationship with China. For example, it has co-bank its ambassador to Taiwan even 10 years ago. The last point is that if Vatican abandoned Taiwan, then it would lead to a great chain reaction. That means some other Taiwan's diplomatic partners in Latin America, in Africa, would follow Vatican because their national religion is Catholicism. So Vatican would become much symbolic for these countries.
So indeed, the Taiwan Authority will be under a lot of strain in 2018, and that will say it was a lot of uncertainties.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Gregory Zhang, and also thank you.
Thank you.
And you've been watching Dialogue here on CGTN. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.